Whispers of Wisdom, where we journey together through ancient wisdom and hidden practices, seeking what lies beyond. Power, influence, and authenticity. I'm in conversation with a woman who's mastered all three. There are some leaders who write the rules, there are some leaders who follow rules, and there are those who tear them all up, toss them away, and rewrite and create something absolutely new. I'm in conversation with Shreya Krishnan. She is the managing director of Anita.org, a fierce advocate for women in technology. And just before this conversation, she said, for all women. Not just that, she's worked with some of the biggest brands, working on CSR, on DEI, on corporate strategy. There are many, many more facets to her. She's an actor, a theatre artist, a poet. I'm going to get all of it, Shreya. Just give me a moment. What else? Dancer.
Anchor.
Activist. And also a pageant winner recently. Yeah. Shreya, let's dive right into it. Welcome. I'm so delighted to have you here.
So good to be here, Sapna. Lovely and looking forward to this conversation already.
Okay. So shall I start with a tough question?
Always
a tough question. What is the dangerous narrative that women in leadership or in corporate spaces have been fed?
The fact that they have to navigate patriarchy and not dismantle it.
Wow. In your words, what's patriarchy? I mean, everybody understands it differently or at their convenience.
So I think the idea that the world is already been built in a structure that's dysfunctional is something that's true for all genders.
Okay.
Right? It's not based on capacity or capability or the uniqueness of the human being. It's based on a certain gender. So there's already a gendered narrative that the world runs with, right? And especially when it comes to leadership, there's an idea of what leadership looks like. Especially with the archetype of the masculine leader at the helm of efforts. And we all have that conditioning. There's a social experiment where you're made to think of a doctor and a nurse.
Right.
Where you're made to think of an astronaut, a scientist, a writer. So you already have very deeply ingrained gendered archetype stereotyping the roles that people fill. So the minute you're stepping into a leadership role, irrespective of where you are, you've got your own conditioning to break.
Okay.
So that is your own understanding and your own persona of how it's been built and what backgrounds you've been associated with and how you're going to step into that role is already coming with a heavy duty, back engine, which is directing your format and
narratives.
Then there's the external world that has got its own biases.
And supporting the narrative sometimes.
Supporting
in its own
that, sometimes adding to it, sometimes completely questioning your self-worth and your identity itself. There's a lot of identity politics in the world today. And as women, you have to navigate so much of it. And I think the biggest myth we've fed is the fact that we have to become androgynous and masculine and take on that voice and that role to be a leader. Instead of really stepping into our feminine and allowing masculinity or femininity as, again, archetypes that you could access and not gender roles that you ascribe to.
You've been in this leadership role for quite some time and navigating these difficult spaces as we speak, working with some of the biggest brands and corporates. Were you always like this? Or did you do some norm breaking, so to say?
I think when I was young, I remember my first leadership role was when I was 21 years old. So I had joined an organization and the head of marketing at that time quit. So instead of finding somebody from the outside, in 3 months, my super boss who saw the potential in me said, why don't you do this role? I had people who were in their mid-30s, early 40s reporting to me. It was a very big sort of a role to step into.
Yes.
I didn't have any trepidation. I went all gung-ho and enthusiastic, me being me. But I remember a few months into the role that I was discriminated against because I was young, and I was with people who had fantastic careers and most of the team had worked in the US and it was like a contingent of that team that had moved to India. And some of them, the Indian, peers that I had at that time, sort of made me feel like I was inequipped to play the role.
Inequipped to play the role
of being the leader.
Of a leader.
Right? Because I was too young in their heads. So I remember asking my boss then, because by then he'd become my boss, I said, why did you bring me here? If you think that all of them have this perception that I am inequipped. And he said, tell me this, are you doing anything wrong or anything that's not aligned to the role? And then he asked me, are you doing everything right for the role?
Okay.
Anybody in your position, are you doing what they would have done for the role? And I thought about it and I said, yeah. Then he said, everything else is an opinion. And that's their opinion.
What a great boss to have, Shreya. Not everybody has, those kinds of bosses. But then at 21, the understanding of leadership must have been different. How has it evolved now? What does it mean to be a leader now for you?
I think at 21, it was about getting the job done and, getting, finding excitement in the little things to do. And it wasn't so much about understanding the larger framework of things, of what is that cog in the wheel that you are. But I think today, it's so much more both higher up and deep down. That means you have the 30,000 feet in the air view, and you also have the really, let's go deep, let's sink into it, let's dismantle it to see what it looks like, and then put it together. And I think in terms of the way my leadership has transitioned, it's become a lot more intentional.
Okay.
I have seen myself now as somebody who's an enabler to the people that I work with more than me leading from the front and taking people along. I think I'm more now the kind of person who'll stand behind and say, run.
Intentional leader, you said.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, is that an evolving topic? Because I also see purposeful change, intentional leadership, more awareness around these specific terms. But if you go back maybe 20 decades, leadership was more very structured, more about power, more regimented. Yeah, is the change real, or is it again something is just only a concept?
No, I think it is real because I see it. I see it play out amongst a lot of the leaders that I look to and admire and watch very carefully because it's so beautiful to embody that. When you're led by something that's larger than yourself, when that purpose is what is driving you, I think there is intentionality that comes as a part of that. That is not about where do you get to or what happens to you. I think it's more around creating impact, enabling change in a sustained way, really looking at aspects of people and planet and all of that coming together over profitability. And I think that's where the magic lies, and I see that it is happening in pockets while it's being spoken about a lot more than it's being seen in action.
Absolutely, yeah. You said arriving at a purpose, right? Now, a lot of us understand purpose so differently depending on where we are at that point in life. For some of us, our purpose is just, maybe more self-awareness, more money, better home, better relationships. But I truly understand what you're saying is a purpose that is bigger than you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody, I think one of my mentors said, plant a tree under whose shade you're never going to sit.
Yes.
Is that what you mean by purpose?
I absolutely agree with that idea because I think we're so caught in this race that's been built for us. It's almost designed. The system is designed for you to chase the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. But in reality, change happens when you're not chasing at all.
Wow. Really?
Yeah.
How?
Because when you're talking about change, it's never a chase. Okay. Change is, again, intentional. It's not something you're running after.
Right.
So what we're taught is, we need to get the next best degree and then the next best job and the best paycheck and the best guy to get married to and then the best children to have. And then you put them through the same cycle all over again.
Yeah.
Whereas a purpose that's higher than you has nothing to do with you. It has to do with what are you leaving behind as an imprint of your existence on this planet that does not have anything to do with the car you drive or the title you have or the house you possess. It's so much more beyond you.
In your opinion, how do leaders arrive to that space? Because, most leaders are either chasing numbers or metrics or going through Excels, doing reviews and just chasing numbers. Now, where's the time for one to sit down and say, and a lot of them haven't even figured themselves out. Even at a leadership
Yeah.
space.
Yeah,
It
self-awareness
takes a lot,
is,
isn't it?
See, I keep saying that self-awareness without self-work is very detrimental. If you know that these are your triggers and you don't work on them, what's the point of that awareness or the knowledge?
Right.
Numbers are very important. It's important to know what direction you're driving in. I have the luxury of working in a not-for-profit space now, which is why I can say what I'm saying. You know, it's very social impact. It's very driven by let's get the community, let's change lives,
Right.
So I know that I have that luxury and the privilege of being intentional in driving change at a very grassroots level of impact. But we often forget that as people of power, influence, and authenticity, like you said, we have the power to influence people around us. Irrespective of what position of leadership you hold, you have a certain circle of influence which you can always impact. Why do we remember our best bosses? Why do we remember the nicest people we worked with? It's not because of something that they did, but like that line that says, they won't remember what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
Right? So while numbers are very tactical and strategic as a way to look at and measure, and I think measurement's important, but where and what are you measuring is a lot more important than just chasing those numbers. And I think leadership is about assessing that and saying, okay, I'm going to look at these parameters as well as my own leadership journey of what have I really achieved.
Yeah.
And that's not just at numbers. It's also the
Perfect.
impact you've created. It's also the stories you've told. It's also the connections that you've built, the enabling that you've done for the ecosystems that you're a part of.
Yeah. And
all of that.
And I'm also thinking it's the other way around is also true. It's not just about the big things and the big intentions and the big purposes, but some moments it's also about those numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. But you should have the ability to play that range. And, you should be able to spin the spectrum, so to speak. So access what you need at what time in a manner that you're so well informed that you know exactly what is needed of you at that point in time. And if you don't, have the kindness to yourself to learn for the next time.
So I want to talk more about women leaders. Yeah. How can women balance power and authenticity, right? Women are almost, sometimes they, or in every scenario, they are expected to act gracefully under fire, have a lot of emotional intelligence, come with that bit of understanding of how everyone's feeling. But then I feel sometimes there are other aspects like decision making that I will say it that a lot of us lack.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you balance power and authenticity together?
So I think we've been fed a lot of self-doubt. Right from the time we're little. Look at what people around you say about women who are, you're called bossy, you're called, there are a lot of labels that women are given. Too sensitive, too pushy. There's so many. You can keep changing adjectives there and there'll be a zillion that women are given that are completely contradictory to each other even. And that's all perceptional. I keep saying this. Somebody else's perception of you is an opinion. Your perception of you is truly who you are.
But we are always wanting validation from outside.
That is because we've not taught ourselves to give it to ourselves. And that's where the decision making becomes complicated. Because then you're always seeking that external sort of voice. Look at the media around us. Right? Even today, a Glow and Lovely will tell you that if you're a certain skin color, you won't get a job. Right? Yeah. And there are things that you'll hear all the time. Oh, she's too pretty for it.
Yeah. Yes.
There is no cap when it comes to people's opinions or expectations from you. So when you're seeking validation unconsciously for all of the wrong things. Yeah. And that puts you in a loop of this, what they call the imposter syndrome, which, by the way, is not a psychological clinical condition. It's an imposter syndrome is just a figment of our lack of inability to access that.
Absolutely.
Right? So that's where the decision-making piece or process becomes a lot more inequipped for women because they're told not to trust their instincts. And they're told that, you need to override that to get to that level. Whereas the opposite is true. you have more access to power when you're at your authentic best, because then you've dropped all the masks and you don't care anymore.
I'm sure you've arrived at this after so many trials and failures and self-doubt. I'm sure you had self-doubts, like all of us have in the journey, but you can correct me if you didn't experience that at all.
I mean, I was told I was overconfident as a kid in school all the time because I had pigtails and I had big fat soda glasses. Even today, my nickname for my classmates in school is Sodi. And, you know, I would always dress a little tomboyishly. So I was made fun of that as well.
Right.
And back in the day, there was no trans inclusion or anything, right? So people were very easy to pass judgments and stereotypes about me. And I grew up being as confident back then, but then it was overconfidence, and now suddenly this confidence in this appeal and in this manner is a lot more palatable for people than from somebody who wears thick fat glasses and has oiled hair and braids. And I think I had the privilege of growing up in a home where it was about capacity and not about gender. Like my younger brother didn't have as much access as I had. And my mom would say that's because I know she can handle it, I know he can't.
Beautiful.
Right? So I grew up in an environment that never taught me gender that as a limiting factor.
Right.
So I grew up with that mindset and I kept wondering, why do people call me overconfident, you know? And I was darker. So Karpi, Kali, these were all like nicknames that I used to have when I was young. But I didn't care. I think my boorish, don't care-ish behavior has protected me a lot.
It reminded me so much about my childhood. We are two sisters and my mom, she brought us up fearless and we didn't have any man to be compared with. Yeah. So me and my sister did many things that maybe somebody else wouldn't do. Those choices, like even in our life right now, the choices that we made. And now as you were narrating, I said, okay. And I always used to wonder, where is this coming from? And then, like you said, it's really the influence of your parents and your upbringing. I was called Lambu, Hunchback, Karpi. Nobody will marry you because you're too tall.
Or you're too dark.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've grown up in an India that was very colorist, right? There's so much colorism even today. It's unbelievable how much of it exists and how much of it is associated to a woman's confidence. And I know for a fact, like there's this poem that I've written called Let Me Tell You the Story of a Dark-Skinned Girl. And it goes along the journey of this girl, right? And every time I perform it, there's some mother in the audience who'll come and say, can you please send this to me? I want this to be read to my daughter. We're in 2025. And in 2025, there are young girls who are so underconfident because of their skin color. Look at the detriment, right? That 20-something-year-old is going to grow up thinking that this is a limiting factor. And that's the detriment of this societal structures that we create constantly that's debilitating. And that obviously spills over then into leadership and all of that, right?
So we're talking about it. There's so much more awareness. But I also feel like a lot of it hasn't changed at the ground level. Maybe in corporates, people like are more mindful. But then if you go back to your families or your hometowns, you will still hear these remarks.
You cannot have a corporate framework for inclusion up to the time that you have a change in mindset in your homes and families. How much ever you do, there are people who will sit at a dinner table and in a wedding and comment about the way the bride and the groom looks.
Yeah.
As long as that doesn't change, it's not going to change. In corporates, people, like you said, will be more mindful because it's structured.
Yeah.
But the idea of a woman being in a space that she's not supposed to be seen in according to people's mindsets, that can change only when homes change.
Shreya, you've really touched upon something very big. You said if the change doesn't happen at home, it's not going to happen in the corporates.
Yeah.
And how are we going to bring about that change? Do you have any ideas?
I think I would appeal to the mothers because a lot of times, a lot of mothers lean in and resource in the power that patriarchy gives them. I'm somebody's wife, so I have power to his patriarchy. I'm somebody's sister, so I have power of his patriarchy. I'm somebody's daughter, so I'm resourcing in my father's patriarchy. A lot of times, women resource in patriarchy because they don't have the power of the feminine that they've unlocked just yet. But the minute a woman decides to unlock that, and it's literally a switch, it's that switch once it happens, and you will see it. You will see it in the heroine's journey, in movies, in cinema as well, where there is that one switch that will happen. And then this woman decides that, she can either destroy the world and come out of it, or she's going to, destroy her world and access that power. And I think it's that shift which is going to take time.